Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 from the A to the Bay podcast. Jordan Watkins alongside, as always, my guy KD, Kevin Dana. Kevin, I got one question for you.
Yes,
I got to
sir.
ask you this. How was your week?
It was pretty good. Thanks to Thomas Booker, it was great.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that was incredible. Shout out T Book, and again, shout out to Coach Alomar too. I
Yeah.
know how much he goes over every week, looking at different field goal line protection units where there's a weakness, how we're going to attack them, and obviously he came through huge uh,
Oh,
this weekend. So congrats to Stanford, obviously getting the axe back from Berkeley. Uh, it was pretty funny too, because obviously there are no fans right now in anything pretty much in California. But obviously there's a little things with Strawberry Canyon, that little
yep.
Mount Hill area in the back. So you saw some fans up there. So it's pretty cool to see. But yeah, as close as you can get in a big
Whew.
game. But thankfully, it's the Axes. Well, is it in Washington or is
Yeah.
it back? Okay, I guess that's
Yeah,
the
that's
question.
a great question. Do they bring the axe with them up to the Pacific Northwest for this next 3 weeks or however long they're going to be up in Washington and Oregon, getting ready for their next couple of games? Um, but it's interesting, kind of funny. Like in a rivalry, how many games in big game have been decided by special teams. Obviously, there was the play, which we shall not speak of,
He was
but there
down.
was, they were down a couple of times. There's a forward lateral in there. Kate Scott's coming on, not to, give away the introduction or anything. Jordan will introduce her properly, but I'm sure she has a different take on what happened in that game. But also, I believe it was 1990 where there was like an onside kick recovered, or there was like a late, like, one that Stanford won. They either,
Right.
and Troy Clarity would know this better than me. I'm showing my history ignorance. But there was like, they recovered an onside kick and then kicked a field goal to win the game or something like that. There was some, and then, of course, blocking an extra point that would have tied the game. Incredible.
Right. And you're just sitting here thinking, because the way the whole game went was more so Chase Garbers making things happen with his legs. Obviously, they broke a big run too. I think it was earlier in that either late third or early fourth quarter. It was like an off tackle run to the left side. It was a big gain. And so you're just thinking, make them pass, make Chase beat you with his arm, and then next thing you know, they score, and it's like, oh goodness, we're gonna go to overtime, aren't we?
Yeah.
But thank goodness we didn't. And again, the axe is back, we presume, in Palo Alto. So,
Waddy, what's holding the axe like?
oh, it's awesome. First off, I think it's heavier than I think a lot of people think it is. There's a reason why when you usually see it and pictures of it, there's about 3 or 4 people holding it at once. It's pretty heavy.
How much would you estimate it weighs?
How much would I estimate? I'd say at least somewhere in the 40-50 range,
Okay.
which, I think people were thinking, oh, that's not that heavy. But then once
No.
you actually pick it up and you're not expecting something to be heavy and it is,
Yeah.
that's one thing. Like a lot of college football trophies in general are pretty heavy.
Yeah.
They're pretty heavy. But yeah, so of course, we were making the joke a little earlier about is Stanford bringing it to Washington or what's going to happen there? Because here in Santa Clara, well, I'm in Alameda, but in Santa Clara County, where Stanford is, there is the rule now: no contact sports through December 21st, I believe.
Yep.
And Kevin, you were actually just mentioning this about your schedule too, about how now it's just chaos everywhere trying to schedule things. Obviously, the men's basketball team was just in North Carolina at the Maui Invitational, and now they're trying to figure out to find some games over there because they don't want to have to do the 14-day quarantine to come back here. Women's basketball is now going to Vegas to play UNLV. Shout out Lindy LaRock, by the way, first ever
Yes.
win as a head coach for UNLV the other day. So yeah, everything's just everywhere right now.
Yeah, no, and we're speaking on a Thursday morning, and because there are so many moving parts, and you got to try to figure out TV times and stuff. Like, we're 48 hours away from a game potentially, and we don't know what time the game is going to be played. And so, like, all right, Stanford's looking for opponents in the North Carolina area, and there's a chance that they might play this weekend or next week, and all right, if there's a game this weekend, then that's at most 3 days away. Then what time is that game? Like, there's just so many considerations to take into account, and it'll just kind of make your head spin.
Oh yeah, I mean, you were just explaining it to me, and feel free to explain it to everyone else if you want. The potential schedule that you might have coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, so there are a couple of games, and since things aren't official, I'm not going to say the teams, and I do work for a few teams, so I do feel like I can cover my bases here, not give anything completely away. But there might be a game. So there is definitely a Stanford women's basketball game I'm doing on Saturday. We don't know what time that is. Now, for another team, I might have a game on Sunday, and for another team, I might have a game on Sunday. So I might have two broadcasts on Sunday. I would love to get them both in, especially since I've done 3 broadcasts since March 8th. But we don't know what time either of those games are or if they are actually going to happen. And that is broadcasting in 2020 in a nutshell.
So you prepare, because like you said, we're only a few days out now. Do you just prepare as if you're going to call all those games, or how do you go about that?
So I'm going to prepare for the games I have the most confidence in happening. So obviously the Saturday game is happening. At least, Stanford Athletics has announced that game is happening. So I'm going to watch Lindy's first win. I watched the first quarter live last night, then got carried away with some other stuff. So I'm going to watch UNLV's games. So the 3 quarters of that game, and then their season opening loss to Northern Arizona. I'm going to prepare for UNLV women's basketball. I already got my Stanford stuff on the Stanford women's stuff set and ready to go because they've had a couple of games canceled, so I haven't needed to update anything. And then with extra time I will prepare for that, for the other games. But the other thing is, for one of those games that might happen on Sunday, they don't know who the opponent would be. So that makes it really tough. It could be any of a number of teams. So like, you just kind of throw your hands up at that point.
And, it's funny when I was playing at Stanford, we would always on Mondays during Monday meetings, you have your nameless, faceless segment where we're going down personnel, the running backs, linemen, quarterbacks, whomever, and they'll have numbers and things like that, but no names, no faces. And now it seems like that's what a lot of people trying to do sports in quarantine are doing. I don't know who we're playing, but we're playing. So here we go.
Exactly. No, that's a great way to put it. I love listening to football color analysts just say the number of a player, like 32. He makes a great cut. Like, I always get a kick out of that. But I guess it goes into like those Monday meetings, right, or something like that, where you just kind of, when you're going over a scout, you're not saying Jamar Jefferson, you're saying 6, I believe his number is.
Right. Right. So it'd be something like that. And again, obviously, even for announcers, like we're talking about football, there's a good chance you might have 1, maybe 2 max games, football games you'd have to call, like on ESPN level, something like that per week. And so, you might know a little bit about all the other teams going on in the country just because you follow football. But when it comes to, well, I guess it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, whenever you have a game to call, the ins and outs of those both teams that you're playing. You can just say anything and everything. But like you mentioned, so many games had to be rescheduled last minute. We saw it in the Pac-12 last week with Colorado and San Diego State, where you don't have that familiarity. So and again, obviously, it's tough for the players, but for a lot of people around, it's pretty difficult too.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, you really just almost have to. There might be some situations as broadcasters where you just have to do a game on the fly, and like, I mean, yeah, there was a game I had where I had an hour's notice, and it's like, all right, well, we're just gonna do it. So
sorry about
that. it's all good. I mean, I didn't know that was a rule either. So yeah, I think we were all kind of taken off guard there, but hopefully we can get you back in the booth soon, man.
That would be lovely. I would appreciate it. But obviously, we'll see what happens with not only Santa Clara County, but just everything in the conference and the country as well. Because, I mean, we look around, for example, you look in the Big Ten, one of the teams that you would think that everybody would have being a college football playoff favorite now might not play in their conference championship, talking about
This is
Ohio
interesting.
State. This is very interesting because now it's a situation where you have Michigan, who they have to play Ohio State next week. They're supposed to play Maryland this Saturday, but that game's canceled because Michigan has a COVID situation.
Yeah.
So if Michigan can't play Ohio State, at least by the rule right now, as I understand it, they would not qualify for the Big Ten championship.
Yeah.
And that makes things so interesting because, especially since Northwestern just lost last week,
Yeah.
there's a chance, depending on they can make an exception or whatever, we'll see what happens. There's a chance the Big Ten might not have anybody in a college football playoff.
Here's what I think is going to happen. What Ohio State's like 4-0 right now, right? I think
so.
All right. So say they finish the season 5-0. Like, say Michigan doesn't play, which would be incredible if Michigan is the reason Ohio State doesn't go to the Big Ten.
I said the same thing.
It would be awesome. If Ohio State finishes 5-0, they're going to be in the college football playoff. I don't care if Northwestern wins. I think their game this week against Minnesota is canceled too. So even if Northwestern or whoever wins the Big Ten championship, if Ohio State's not in the game, people aren't going to care. Ohio State's still going to get in there because they have a brand name big enough, and that's all that matters in college football. If Alabama was 3-0 this year, they'd be in the Final Four. That's just the matter of the fact. If they had a couple of wins against top 25 teams as part of that, and Ohio State has the win over Indiana, who's looked good now. Their quarterback is out for the year,
But
unfortunately, I liked watching Penix play.
Same.
But I think Ohio State's in. I think both Clemson and Notre Dame are going to get in. The SEC is now calling the ACC out for scheduling, paving the way for Clemson and Notre Dame to get in the college football playoff, as if the SEC has never used any scheduling gymnastics, as if they have never scheduled FCS schools at the end of November before rivalry games. Incredible for the SEC to be calling out another conference. I think we're going to have those teams, and then that leaves one more spot for Notre Dame. Not Notre Dame, for Alabama. And it's unfortunate. And the Big 12's getting way too much love this year. When they're out of conference, they were getting worked by Sun Belt schools, and somehow Iowa State's ninth in the country right now.
That's right. I remember that. And the thing about it too, though, when I think about the playoff, part of it is your resume. If you've had X amount of wins, big wins, whatever, but obviously a lot of it too is eye test. And when you look at Ohio State play, even though it's a small sample size, you can't sit here and tell me they're not one of the 4 best teams in the country.
100%.
You can't do it. And so now the question I think is really going to come down to is Clemson and Notre Dame, because if Notre Dame wins, they're in. Clemson then would have 2 losses, but obviously one of those would be without Trevor Lawrence. So how much do you penalize them for that? Do you as much? Not at all. If Notre Dame wins, if Notre Dame loses, I assume they'll still be in. 1-loss team, your only losses to Clemson. Hard to really knock somebody out because of that. It's just unfortunate because I'm looking at Cincinnati, and as great as they've been playing, and you would think of all years where you could finally get one of those group of 5, even though I call the American a Power 6 conference. That's my opinion, Power 6. But you look at those group of 5 conferences and you're like, okay, if there was ever a year where they could get their fair shake at getting into the playoff, it would have been this year. And here they are still behind. I believe there's still Texas A&M and Florida that are in front of them in the rankings. And the way I look at it is only one of those teams will be able to play in a conference championship. Alabama's already beat Texas A&M, so I don't think they're going to be there. And then Florida is probably going to be playing Alabama again, where, Florida loses twice. And then obviously you have to move Cincinnati ahead of them. And then the potential, Cincinnati's going to play in the American, so they'll probably win a conference championship. And so it's just, how we're talking about the situation before, it's just really hard right now to see how they're going to jump into that top four, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, they would need Clemson to lose again, and I would hope, and I don't care if both of those losses are to an undefeated team who would be ranked in the top 2 in the country in the college football playoff standings. If you lose 2 games, you shouldn't be in the college football playoff. And I don't care if you played that. I don't care if you didn't have the number 1 pick of the next draft in one of those games, and you played them close on the road for sure, and it probably caused a COVID outbreak in South Bend, Indiana, as a result because of kids, storming the field. But no team has ever made the college football playoff with 2 losses, and because there haven't been as many out-of-conference games, we can't definitively say the ACC, just because they have 2 teams ranked in the top 4, is the best conference in college football. I mean, obviously they're not. The strength traditionally of that conference at the bottom is not very good.
Right.
It's just in this year, if you're gonna, you can't have a 2-loss team. And honestly, I think Cincinnati should be there. But what we know about college football is that it's very it's very 1%-ish, and that's never going to change. And honestly, they should move the college football playoff back this year so teams could have a chance to make up more games. But the schedule is so rigid. People in college football at the decision-making level are so freaking rigid that we just know that's not going to change. And we knew that was never going to change from the get-go. So here we go. We're going to see the same teams in the college football playoff that we do every year. And half the teams who are in the who are in the FBS level are automatically disqualified from ever reaching college football playoff because they don't play in the right conference.
Which, again, it bars the question, I think, of going forward, and I know a lot of people have been asking this over the years, will we see, and if we do see it, how big our conference expansion is going to be? I really do think, and this is going to be a great study of it. Again, talk about Cincinnati. There is, and I know their schedule's a little whack because a lot of teams had to cancel, move things around. So let's just say we got to put together what we can. There's BYU, Coastal Carolina's having a good year. There's the App State, all these group of 5 teams, and obviously BYU, the independent, but all these other teams that we would never talk about when it comes to that college football playoff. And of course, there was Central Florida a few years ago. List goes on and on. Where it's after a while, you think people are going to get fed up, try to get some more to that big table, and so yeah, I mean, I think this year is going to be the year where they really push the argument over the top, just because of what's going on with Cincinnati. And like you said, we both just don't really see that window for them to get in.
Yeah, at some point, the olive branch, if you can call it, for a group of 5 school to get into an Access Bowl New Year's 6 game, just it isn't enough, in my opinion. And if that's the chair, you got, what is that, probably 65 schools vying for one bowl berth, as opposed to the other 65 and the other Power 5. These are round numbers. For the other 11 bowl berths in the New Year's 6, that's obviously a huge disparity. And when that one spot doesn't guarantee, you're not getting a college football playoff spot. I just don't know what the Cincinnati's, BYU's, Coastal Carolinas now. I mean, we'll see if that's sustainable. But Cincinnati, BYU, Central Florida have at least had some staying power. Of course, Boise State, you got to throw into that conversation. They can't really leave their conferences, because if they say, all right, we're going to go independent in football, and say they just schedule the Cincinnati's, UCS, and then they try to get 3 or 4 Power 5s in there, what's going to happen to your other sports that need a conference? And I'm sure the Mountain West would be pissed if Boise State leaves, and they're all right, you can take your women's and men's basketball and all your other sports with you too, and you're not going to be playing in this league. Those schools can't do an independent schedule for 30 games. Like that's not feasible. So they're kind of stuck in a hard place here. I don't see how this gets resolved in a better way for the group of five schools.
I think at the end of the day, it just goes back to the point, because I think I agree with you in that standpoint. I just feel like it goes back to the playoff is going to be expanded. And again, I feel like of any year to do it, this would have been the year to at least test it, right?
Yeah.
Because you have all these games are going to be canceled. You have schedules, you got to move around. And so it's like, if any year where you needed to at least test it, right? Just test it out, see how it works, the logistics of it. 2020 would have been the year to try it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes the only problem with that, Waddy, is that it makes too much sense. And in college football, we are unwilling to bend our own rules, or not bend our own, but like we're unable to look at things differently and say, hey, maybe we should experiment with this. Hey, maybe we should experiment with that. It's like once something's set, it's set, and there's nothing you can do about it. Even though this year we've seen you could schedule games within 2 days notice. Like Colorado, San Diego State, like you mentioned, I think that game was scheduled on Thursday and played on Saturday
night. Yep.
Yeah. So like these can happen. It's not that, I mean, if you can schedule that game in 48 hours notice, you can do a lot of things, but what works for the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 and Big 10 and Pac-12, even though it's not really working for the Pac-12, that's all that matters.
Pac-12 is coming back. That's all I got to say. They are. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, broadcast announcer and also host of the Morning Roast, Kate Scott, will be here to join us. We will be right back. Stay tuned. All right, everyone, welcome back to From the A to the Bay podcast. Jordan Watkins alongside Kevin Dana, and I'm so proud to introduce our guest today, broadcaster for the Pac-12 Network, Stadium, also is one of the hosts of the Morning Roast. Obviously, we talked to Vontae Hill a few weeks ago. Kate Scott's with us. Kate, how are you doing? And by the way, I love the color of the shirt.
Thank you, Jordan. I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed in our boy Kev rocking the teal green today. You know how hard it is for me to sport anything remotely Cardinal-esque, being the Cal alum that I am. But it's great to be with you, even though Kevin's starting us off on a low note, Jordan.
Hey, I don't keep it real. I keep it teal. You feel? So that's all I gotta say. But I would apologize for what happened on Friday afternoon, but I would not be being honest with myself.
It would only be a Cal football team if big game ended like that, right? I mean, shout out to Thomas Booker. We all know what an awesome dude he is on and off the field. So for him to get the fumble earlier in the game, but yeah, I was actually watching it. I'm bubbling with my best friend from Cal. She just moved back here in May. Her husband's in the Coast Guard. So they're here for the first time in 15 years. So we haven't watched a big game together in 15 years. So the two of us were watching it, and my wife and her husband were like, oh my gosh, they're going to tie the game. And we go, guys, this is Cal. They have to make the extra point. They were like, yeah, Chris Brown touchdown. And we were like, wait. No, wait. Got to make this extra point. And lo and behold, we Cal'd it. So, yep, there we go. Congratulations. You'll have the axe for a year, Jordan and Kev, and it'll come back here next year, hopefully, when there's fans.
We'll see about that. Wait, so all four of you in your bubble, all Cal people?
Well, my wife is a UCLA grad, unfortunately. Okay. So we get along most of the time. We unite over our hatred of USC, which is really fun because I'm sure you guys, everybody hates USC, right? Except for Ronnie Lott. Maybe one other person. And then, good question. Hale, I think he probably most recently relates to Princeton because he went to Princeton for grad school a couple of years ago. But he played soccer back in the day, back east in a little school. So, but yeah, no Stanford on this side of the Bay, boys.
Oh, you know what else is also not on that side of the Bay? Actually, you know what? I'm not going to go there. Let's go into some questions.
Go there later, Jordan. Go there later, buddy.
I will. But no, obviously, since we're talking about college football and things that happened this weekend, a huge moment happened in Columbia, Missouri. Sarah Fuller became the first woman to kick in a Power 5 game, and that was so huge, so awesome. I was happy I was watching the game. I was mostly watching because I wanted to see her kick a field goal.
Same.
But,
I know.
Vanderbilt's offense had other ideas. But I mean, even just that moment was so awesome to watch, and kind of go through your thoughts and your feelings when you saw that happen.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, these are happening more and more often. Women doing firsts over the last number of years. So to see Sarah Fuller get the call up because she was such a great goalkeeper for the Vanderbilt women's soccer team, for folks who don't know the story, and they, won the SEC championship in soccer, and the football team literally didn't have a kicker, and obviously it's COVID, so you can't just bring in a bunch of kids to try out because of all the regulations. So they said, who do we got on our soccer teams? Oh man, this girl's got a great leg. So she came in, tried out. So she passed all of the tests, which I think is important to note because so many people, understandably, are coming out this week. Oh, it's a publicity stunt. Look how bad the football team is. They just wanted some positive pub, which I get. I mean, I've faced that at every first that I've accomplished. I understand the people who had that reaction. But so it was just great to see the team rally around her, the coaches rally around her. Got to be honest, I too, Jordan, was disappointed we didn't get to see her kick a field goal. And also, if I'm honest, I was a little disappointed that they had her squib the kick because my first reaction was, oh no, she messed it up because of somebody who's also done first. Like, the biggest thing you're thinking about is like, don't mess this up for the rest of your gender, right? This could be the only chance for the next 25 years if you don't show out. So my first thought when I saw her do the kick, not knowing that they asked her to squib it, was, oh man, she's going to be so pissed at herself because she's such a high level athlete. But now finding out that was what they wanted, she did what the coaches wanted. Just a great story because there's going to be little girls who were watching the game and who are now going to grow up thinking, that's rad. I can maybe actually play college football because I saw her do it. And also, as I'm sure you guys have talked about before, like, it's also important for guys to see that too, just to see how her teammates were reacting to her, how the coaches were supportive of her, how, the announcers, Kevin, were like thanking the heavens that they had that story because 2 minutes into the second quarter, that game was over. So they're like, keep flashing Sarah on the sideline. So, so many emotions, Jordan, right? Like excited, but also a bit disappointed with how things turned out. But I think overall, another great step in the right direction. And hopefully this will just be the first of many of these stories. I know we had Katie Hinda kicking at New Mexico a number of years ago. So hopefully this will help to pick up steam over the next few years.
And Kate, obviously you've alluded to some of the first you've been a part of, and we definitely want to get into that. But with respect to women, with respect to women in football, what is the next, I guess, frontier you would like to see? Obviously, we had Callie Brownson became the first female position coach for a football for an NFL team when she filled in for the Browns last week in their win to get to 8-3. What do you kind of think is the next step there for
it's great to football? It's great to see the movement at the coaching level. As more and more people get into that side of things because they're allowed opportunities. Obviously, we have Katie Sowers here in the Bay Area. So I hope that continues to happen. I don't think anyone is there yet when it's to being a full-on position coach, which will obviously then lead to a coordinator position. So I think we're a ways behind then because of the same reason that there's so few women doing what I do, Kevin and Jordan, because you look at the minor leagues and there's just not enough talent there right now. So people just need to keep getting more reps. So would it be awesome for me to say, like, I can't wait to see a quarterback or something? Yeah, but we know we're not anywhere close to that. So I think actually flashing back here to San Francisco, like Hannah Gordon, when it comes to the executive level, right? We saw it with Amy Trask all those years ago, but Hannah has been grinding here for the 49ers for a number of years. She's a friend of mine and she has worked her way up and now she's their head lawyer and doing so much for them. I know she loves being with the 49ers, so I'm sure it'll take a lot for her to leave, but Hannah's ready to be a president of a football team here in the NFL. So I would love to see that in the next few years because you guys know that's where it starts. When you get people who aren't white men into the decision-making roles, that's when all of a sudden fellow executives and then down to the coaches and then it all starts at the top. So when people look and think just a little bit differently at the executive, at the top boss level, all of a sudden the rest of the organization can start to look different as well. Not always, it depends on the person, but I have a feeling that Hannah, being the Oakland girl that she is and Stanford alum that she is, would lead to that. So I think that's probably the next step, Kevin. So I hope we see that in the next couple of years.
And I think that would be the right next step. I think you see what's happened so far in sports this year, right? Obviously, Jeannie Buss being the owner of the Lakers. I think she's the first woman owner to win an NBA championship. You have Kim Ng with the Miami Marlins, first woman GM in baseball. But going back to a point you were talking about too, I know obviously you call football, and the unfortunate side of it is when we looked at Sarah Fuller and some of the comments, per usual, that she had to deal with. And I'm sure, unfortunately, this is probably the case that she knew it was going to happen, so she didn't pay much attention to it. In your experience too, calling football, because everyone looks at it as, the male sports, the guy sport, guys territory. Did you ever receive anything similar to that? How'd you deal with it? Is it still happening? Kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, I've been actually pretty lucky, Jordan. I think there's so many layers to why I've been lucky. I think because as much as people want to say I'm a trailblazer, I'm not the first tier, right? That's the Beth Mowens and the Pam Ward. And Beth still puts up with it, even as I'm just finding out minutes before we're chatting that she's going to get to call a Vikings game this weekend, which is awesome. So just a number of firsts. So I think not being that initial first person has really helped. I think the fact that I'm here in the Bay Area, you all know, like, just how accepting people are here. And not only that, I think because I came from the base in radio, so many sports fans of all the teams in the Bay Area already knew who I was and knew that I have sports knowledge that is just a part of me. So I think that answered a lot of questions beforehand. I think that's one of the things that maybe Sarah or Beth, when they were starting out, didn't get the benefit of the doubt. But I have thankfully gotten the benefit of the doubt at a lot of places. So I've had, a handful of awful messages and emails and stuff, but for the most part, I've just been critiqued and criticized as a broadcaster, which Kevin knows, like, that is all you can ask for. People can say you suck, but that's just their opinion of your voice or your call. Like, it hasn't had to do with me being a woman. It's just been like, oh, that was a crappy call of that touchdown, which sometimes I agree with. I need to call a lot more football. I would say that's, as far as my play-by-play goes, the sport I'm probably the worst at, just because I just need more reps when it comes to football. But yeah, so I've been really lucky. And I think it comes to finally just the support of the men like you guys and the people I work with. I can't say that enough, how much that helps when a Sarah Fuller or a Beth is getting the blowback, to have coaches and teammates or fellow broadcasters tweet out or say, like, y'all need to back off. She probably knows way more than you do about football. Having comments like that for people that people know the game causes them to step back a lot. So I encourage any guys who are listening to this. I mean, Kevin's been great at this over the years, supporting me in my career, but it's just assumed that guys have more sports knowledge than women. That's just how we are as a culture. I get it. I've accepted it. So when guys step up and say, hey, back off, she knows way more than you will ever know. That's been really awesome and nice to see.
Yeah, and obviously that's the unfortunate part of our culture, that just, it becomes so gendered where, oh, he's a guy, he must know sports.
Totally.
Or it's unfortunate that it is that way. With respect to your career, and I know we've talked about this, the one thing that I really appreciate you as a play-by-play broadcaster is, like, when you do the sport, you have the lingo down. And it's not just, Kate, you and I have both seen play-by-play broadcasters when they do a different sport and they keep it super general, and it's like, this person has not watched this sport.
Yeah.
And, like, so I remember watching you do, like, I think it was a Santa Clara Cal soccer game. Obviously, you have an extensive background in soccer, but, like, you were a soccer expert. When I've seen you do volleyball broadcast, you're a volleyball expert, and to me, that's obvious. I appreciate that, broadcaster to broadcaster. With respect to football, and that's the toughest sport to get reps on around here. Like, if you want to call college football in the Bay Area, you are literally in the worst place for that.
Good luck. Yeah.
There aren't really, because the schools have their team broadcasters. Mm-hmm. And then, Pac-12 Networks only gets so many games.
And let's be honest, Kev, we've got some of the best broadcasters when it comes to that, right? We've got Ted Robinson, who's the voice of the 49ers forever. We've got Roxy Bernstein, who's been calling games forever. JB Long was here for a long time, now the voice of the LA Rams. Guy Haberman. There's just so much talent when it comes to play-by-play here that it is really difficult. But thank you for saying what you did. But yeah, football's an interesting sport to call, and I'm still struggling because I know you haven't gotten to call that much, Kev, and then I'll actually let you go back to hosting your own podcast. But I'm still not sure I love watching it. I'm a huge football fan, But people ask me, like, baseball is the one sport so far I haven't really called. And a part of me wants to keep it that way because I just get to be a fan. Because once you work in this industry, you're still a fan, but your fandom shifts and you just watch games differently. So it's been great to break down some barriers for other people who want to do this. But I got to be honest, and my agents will hate me for saying this, if I never call another football game, like, I don't know if I'll be that mad, just because I love the game so much. And I hope that other people who are getting more reps than maybe I have at this point will be inspired by it and come on through and kick the doors down.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with just asking about like those first experiences of calling a football game on Pac-12 networks and calling an NFL game, because those reps are so hard to come by in this area.
Yeah, well, I'm relentlessly self-critical. I think you two probably both are as well. That's how we get to where we are right now in our careers and lives. So I wish I would have done a whole lot better, because if we're being honest, I'd called maybe 10 football games when I got the call to do the preseason games for the 49ers. And it was awesome. And it was something you couldn't say no to, right? If the 49ers are asking either of you're like, yeah, I'll just freaking figure it out. And I actually think those in a way were easier because it was radio. So, Kev, like, you're just super descriptive. You don't even have time to really tell any stories. You're just literally like trips right, shotgun formation. But then on TV, different story, your storytelling, you have more time. And if I look back and I'm being completely honest, I think I could have done a lot better. I wish I would have done a lot better, and some people may think it's an excuse. I think it's just a reason. When you call 10 games total in your life, or maybe 12 after the 49ers games, I mean, that's how many, probably the majority of the guys who are calling football now at the collegiate level called in their first year of high school. So I'm so far behind when it comes to that sport in reps that it has been difficult to catch up. I wish, it's hard for me to listen back to those broadcasts, and I wanted to tweet the people who were like, man, I wish she was better. I wanted to tweet them like, yeah, I agree. I wish I was better too. And my agents in the Pac-12 said that probably wasn't the best idea. So again, I appreciate the opportunity, and I did the best I could at the time, but I do hope that if I do call more football, I'm able to call, some high school games or some super crappy college games that nobody sees, because it's just like playing a sport, Jordan, or doing anything. You need the 10,000 hours or whatever to get to where you should be when you're performing at that level.
By the way, Kate's agents, if you're listening to this, you want to give me a call about the games that she doesn't want to do because she wants to.
There we go. Kate being the call.
But no, there's one thing though that and Kevin and I, he's been helping me out with this a lot the last few years, and that's the whole process of transitioning, whether it's doing something on radio to TV, or obviously now we're doing a podcast. Like, there's so many different ways to talk about sports or storytell about sports. What are some of those differences to you, and how did that process go about trying to, master and be comfortable doing every single one?
Yeah, I think it's really hard when you start out, Jordan, because you don't have the smooth transition, because you have to remind yourself what the differences are. So that's part of the learning process, football being a great example. Like, yeah, I'd called all the sports Kevin mentioned before, so of course you should be able to call this other one. Oh, wait, but it's a totally different sport with a different rhythm and pacing and requirement for the play-by-play announcer. And same goes for transitioning between, as you mentioned earlier, I'm back in morning sports radio, and that's totally different than being a reporter on the radio or being a play-by-play announcer. You may be telling the exact same story in all those different spaces, but you're going to tell it differently because what that medium is like. So I think it was really hard at first. But one of the things I'm super grateful for is that I now have all that knowledge, because once I've gotten comfortable with all of them, I think one informs the other, because I know what works in a certain medium, what won't work in another one. But, this morning we told a great story on the radio, and because I know that it's an interactive medium versus when I'm on TV and I'm just talking at people, that I can leave some things open-ended so that we can then take calls and respond to texts, and a story that may only take us, 6 or 7 minutes to tell now is a 35-minute segment, because we're expanding it that way. Whereas if I'm telling the same story on a broadcast I'm calling, I better tell it in 30 seconds because we got to get back to the game. So I think super challenging, but also really great to have that knowledge. Kevin knows. That's why I try to do everything all the time, just to steal money from him most of the time, but also to expand my knowledge base.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you were talking about the Patrick Willis segment you guys did.
Yeah.
If that was, but I mean, yeah, that was a great segment. I was listening to it on my walk to the bagel shop today. I mean, that was fantastic. I also liked your Clueless voice, as you deemed it.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's great to be a Valley girl from time to time.
I mean, that's fantastic. But just kind of following up on that, do you have a favorite discipline that, I mean, you've been a play-by-play broadcaster, radio host, TV host, sideline reporter. Personally, for me, I hated doing sideline reporting because I just felt stupid. Like, you have to, like, you're on camera.
It's so hard, right?
It's the toughest by a million years.
I did not have nearly the respect that I have now.
Yeah.
I think it's because it was one of the things I really didn't want to do, because when I was first starting out, like, sideline reporter women were super specific, right? They were bombshells, which you understood because it's a visual medium in TV. But I didn't think I wanted to do that. I got into it because that was one of the few opportunities for women in sports TV right when I was starting out. And I learned very quickly, like, it's super hard to be a good sideline reporter. Anybody can be an okay sideline reporter, but I really want it to be great. And it's super hard. They throw to you, and you better get your story in 20 seconds, and you better smile and not stumble over any words. And then you better ask that coach a really pointed question that everyone knows that you're supposed to ask, but in a way that doesn't take 30 seconds because you have 45 total before you got to throw it back to the booth or whatever. But my favorite thing I'm learning now that I'm back in sports radio, and at least for the moment, because the pandemic have had play-by-play kind of taken away from me, I think it is play-by-play, right, Jordan? Like, it's not until you have something taken away from you that you really know how much you love it. And I love all the things because I get bored super easily. So that's been my favorite part of working with the Pac-12 network, is they allowed me to do all those things, right? If I was at Fox or ESPN or something, I imagine I would be in one specific role because that's what you are. But the fact that I got to do sideline and studio host and do internet shows and do that was great. But play-by-play, man, it's as close as you get as a washed up former high school athlete to be sitting on the benches with the players and getting to travel and hanging out with the coaches, and then getting to be the voice of a game and maybe the voice of the best moment of someone's career or a record-breaking game. Like, that is, as just a sports honk, the coolest thing. So I really am missing play-by-play and hope that I get the opportunity to get back into it once the world rights itself, whenever that may be.
And Kate makes a good point. She talks about how you realize how important something is to you once it's gone. That's how we felt without the Axe for a whole year. I had to get one.
Way to bring it back in. See, that was the slow play, Kev. Oh, well done, Jordan. I know you're just getting started out in this broadcasting thing, but I can tell you already you've got a future.
Thank you. But one thing I think is, again, we talked about not only different mediums that you worked on, you've also done a bunch of different sports. We talked about, obviously, football. You want to get more experience doing that.
Yeah.
Which is one that you didn't know starting off with broadcasting what ended up being like one of your favorite sports to call?
Volleyball, hands down. It was, Jordan, it was the one sport that, like, my friends played it in high school, and I was a yell leader at Cal who had the Axe for 1 year, and it was an enjoyable year. Three of my 4 years, though, when I was at Cal. But it was such a fun sport to watch. But I didn't, as Kevin mentioned earlier, like, know the terminology. I didn't really understand the sport at all, or the strategy, or anywhere near the level of knowledge that I needed to be good at calling it. Of course, that was the first sport that the Pac-12 network asked me to call because they were short on volley, because not a lot of people know the sport. It was, a niche sport that's slowly growing. I'm so glad I said yes and just figured it out, because it is so fast-paced. It is so fun. There's so many great teams in the Pac-12. I mean, you guys know Stanford's won 3 of the last 4 national titles, and being here in the Bay Area, I got to call a lot of their matches. So getting to call, like, Stanford, Minnesota, number 1 against number 3 in the country, Stanford against Texas. Like, it is now one of my favorite sports that 6 years ago didn't even understand it whatsoever. And now I'm really sad and missing that right now, because it would be volleyball season. And again, just since they went to the side out scoring all those years ago, and every single point matters, you don't have to be serving to get a point. It's really fun. They're high flyers. It's just packed with action. So yeah, hands down volleyball. And I hope that maybe we'll get to call it in the spring, or if not this spring, then again next fall.
What has been the hardest sport for you to learn? I read some interviews leading up to your first NHL game. I mean, just the pace of that sport. Like, I called like 10 minutes of a game before we got preempted by some other show on, student radio station once, and my head was spinning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what was it like, being part of that first ever all-female broadcast crew for an NHL game? B, sorry, a couple more questions on top. Like, B, how tough was it to learn hockey? And C, if hockey wasn't your hardest sport to learn, what is it?
I'll start with B and then go back, and then I'll probably have to have you remind me, because again, I'm just a Cal grad, so not great that much when it comes to intellectual things. I was lucky, Kevin. I think the only reason I said yes was that I actually knew the sport. So I grew up going to minor league hockey games down in Fresno. So and then I loved the Sharks when they launched, because they actually played their first ever exhibition in Fresno against the LA Kings, where I grew up. So that hooked me immediately, because I grew up a Bay Area sports fan. So all of a sudden there's a Bay Area hockey team, I'm in. So if I didn't have that base of knowledge, I don't know if I would have said yes to this huge first national broadcast 3 months after I got the phone call. So that was super helpful. So I didn't have to learn the sport. I had to relearn some of the terminology, right? Like I wouldn't know, like passing to Dana at the point. I didn't know where the point was, and I knew the slot and a lot of things, but just to hear, right, across the blue paint, like across the crease, just the different ways they refer to things, as you mentioned, you have to know that stuff and be able to say it calmly and confidently for true fans to believe that you know the sport. So that was the first thing. What was the third question again? What was C?
What has been the hardest sport for you to learn?
Well, I will go back to just getting ready to call hockey. That will be the answer to the C part of the question. Because then going back to the first part, it's kind of like football on skates, right? It's kind of a combination, I say, of soccer and football, because it has the continuous movement of soccer, which I love. And now that I've called that hockey game and gotten it out of the way, I can't wait to actually go back and call more. But similar to calling a football game, things that you don't have to deal with in any other sport, you're super high up. You're like 7 stories in the air. Everybody has a helmet on. So I can't be like, oh, there's Jordan. Like, he's got the close shave. He's got the goatee, which you can see in volleyball and soccer. And like, you can identify players that way. In hockey, similar to football, you better have everybody's number memorized and know it off the bat, because as opposed to football, it just moves so damn fast. You rarely have time to look down at your board. So you better know every single number off the tip. So that was why it was so difficult, but also once I got over that, then so exciting to call for I think kind of the same reason I said I just like calling volleyball, just constant action. And it really is the play-by-play voice, because it moves so fast. Your analyst is similar to a radio analyst, and they don't talk as often as they do in every other sport. So it was incredible to get that opportunity. I was saying this morning on our show when we were talking about just moments in sports that have kind of caught you. I mean, being at the United Center, anybody our age, right? Bulls were rocking, the Blackhawks were awesome. Knowing just the sports history of the entire city of Chicago, and then having it be not just the Blackhawks playing some, like the Tampa Bay Lightning, although, they won the cup, so don't want to shout them out, but the Phoenix Coyotes, there we go, like some random ass team, having it be Blues Blackhawks, this incredible rivalry, the team that just won the Stanley Cup the year before in the Blues, packed house. It was really cool. And it was the first time in my play-by-play career, you guys, that I have actually allowed myself to just, as the national anthem is being sung, just to look around and kind of soak it in and say, like, I'm here. I don't know where we're going to go in the future, but damn, this is awesome. I belong here. I'm surrounded by so many women who really belong here. That was the other awesome part, that every woman except for me are hockey lifers, whether it was my analysts who played, won gold medals, the women in the truck who have been in hockey trucks for decades. That gave me so much, as opposed to the fear I've experienced in those instances in previous first broadcasts, be it football that I've called. It was just like, let's go effing crush this. It felt like running out of a tunnel before a game, Jordan. Like, I'm surrounded by so much talent. I have faith in myself. I'm ready. I've called practice games. Like, this is going to be a great matchup between the Blues and Blackhawks. Let's just blank and go out and crush this. And I said that into talkback, actually, right as we were getting ready to go to air. I just said, let's effing crush this, ladies. Let's effing go out there today and crush this. And I thought we did have a pretty darn good broadcast. I, of course, thought I could have done certain things a little bit better because we're always self-critical. But yeah, so super hard to learn. Thankfully, I had the base of knowledge. Can't wait to do it again. And it was an awesome experience.
I think there's one point you brought up I think is really interesting too. I'm kind of going through it now being from Atlanta, is once all of a sudden your home area, your home team gets a sport that you didn't really watch before, it makes you follow a little bit closely. I mean, obviously for me, it's been Atlanta United the last few years.
Nice.
Where, I didn't watch that much soccer before outside of, maybe it's the Olympics or World Cup or things like that. But now it's any single time I see Atlanta United's playing, like I think they play in a few days against Club America for CONCACAF. And it's like,
watch it. The soccer knowledge.
Yeah, that's what I'm, but like I would have never have done that like a few years ago. And so I think that's such a cool thing because it's like you said, not only do you bring a new outlet or a new fan base into something that they don't watch before, you also might be bringing in a new set of broadcasters or someone else around the sport that they might have never thought about years before too.
And that's where it starts, right, Jordan? People understandably are always asking me, like, how do we get more women? How do we get more Black people? How do we get more Asian American broadcasters? Like, and I try to tell them it starts at the youth. Like, you got to hook these kids in when they're young, so that when they're going to college, like Kevin did, knowing that they want to be a broadcaster, like I didn't know that play-by-play was even a possibility when I was at Cal. Mm-hmm. So that's why, I consider myself a bit behind in certain sports and I'm still catching up. But if we can get these kids hooked into whatever sports and seeing broadcasters that aren't always white men, though we love our white male compatriots and counterparts, giving them someone to be like, oh, look, there's a woman calling this game. Oh, look, there's somebody who looks like me calling this game. I think that's where the huge wave and change will happen that everybody is waiting for. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're getting there as we're seeing Doris Burke and as we're seeing Kara Lawson and just more and more Swin Cash, more and more people get these opportunities that they didn't and weren't even being considered for just a couple of years ago. That's in 10, 15 years when this generation who's kids now, who are seeing all these changes and successful stories happen, that's when they go to school and hopefully we'll get the opportunities to really train for these positions. I think that's when the wave will happen. At least that's my hope.
Kate, you've accomplished so much. I was curious. I'm going to start with two of my favorite Kate Scott broadcasting moments. Then I want to ask you about your favorite broadcasting moments. So your Dory Jackson post-game interview with his mom, where we found out she has breast cancer, like, just your ability to pull in. So you're like, let's bring mama in here. And like, we had, I don't know if you knew that story was going to come, but like, it didn't look like you knew that's just something that just, kind of happened. And you like the way you handled that on the fly was fantastic. Great improv, just everything that like a broadcaster needs to have. Then also Savannah Rennie's Cal debut, the Cal volleyball player after years being sidelined with cancer. Those are two of my favorite moments. What's your favorite broadcasting moment?
Oh, you're giving me chills right now anytime you bring up Savannah. They're writing a book about her story right now. For folks who don't know, I mean, she was supposed to be like, she was Cal's Stanford recruit. Like, we stole her. She was a 5-star, incredible hitter coming out of San Diego, hotbed for volleyball, and gets to Cal and all of a sudden like falls ill, needs a liver transplant as a freshman, then gets post-transplant lymphoma, like just stuff that no kid, regardless of who or where they're from, should have to deal with. And then we found out that she was coming back and she was going to be able to suit up and step out on the court for the first time in her collegiate career. Thankfully, again, Kevin and Jordan, as you're learning, I'm sure, like it's all about connections. And the coaches knew me for years. And so they were able to give me the heads up. This might happen tonight. We don't know. But that allowed me to do what you have to do to be successful in those moments as a play-by-play broadcaster, be prepared for it. So I did all the research. I was practicing it at home, being able to say post-transplant non-Hodgkin's lymphoma without stumbling through it, right? Like knowing what state she lived on so that I wouldn't be looking down, because it's not radio. I knew I wasn't going to have 7 minutes to tell the story. I knew I was going to have to do it quickly between points because volleyball moved fast. So yeah, getting to call her first collegiate point is one of my favorite moments too, just because we then have stayed in touch over the years, and it's been awesome to see her just grow as a human, now a grad transfer across the country, still playing volleyball, and so happy for her. So that was one of them. And then, yeah, I think you brought up my two favorites. I mean, getting to call Tara Vanderveer's 1,000th win was pretty awesome too. And there's a few other just for victory purposes, but was just talking about the Adori interview a couple of days ago, and it gets back to reps. So thank you for saying what you did about it. But if I wouldn't have done high school sideline for a number of years, because I had two similar occurrences to that in high school games I'd done in the past. One was because, again, when you're doing high school sports, everything is so raw. There's no media training. Kids they say whatever they want to say on interviews, which is awesome. That's why I love covering high school sports. Parents are jumping into interviews, right? So the first time that happened, I was interviewing a kid after a game, was, the star player, and his teammates come over. And I was so flustered because it was the first time that I tried to like push him out of the shot. No, guys, I'm trying to talk to Jordan right now. And it was just awful and awkward. Then it happened again a few years later where this kid wins this big championship and I'm talking to him. And he literally, as he's answering the question, goes, wait, they're singing the fight song. He hears the band cue up. He's like, can we go sing the fight song? And I'm like, because, it's live TV. We usually have like 90 seconds. But I knew that we weren't up against anything on the other side. So I go, yeah, let's go sing the fight song. So I sprint with him, my cameraman, we go across the field, gets into the huddle, they sing the fight song. Then the coach gives his post-game speech and my microphone is right there. So I made eye contact with the coach, like, don't cuss, we're on live TV. And the coach got me, gave like this incredible post-game speech. I finished the interview with the kid with all his teammates around him, throw it back to the booth, and like, the guys in the booth were just like, that was amazing. Like, that's what high school football is all about. So thanks to that, when years later I'm doing sideline for a meaningless USC football game, USC beats, I don't even remember the non-conference team they were playing, beat them like 47-0. Adoree Jackson, who obviously we know is a superstar now, he scored a touchdown like every other game he played. But I'm talking to him post-game and his mom is like tearing up and really emotional. So just, again, curiosity, Kevin, Jordan, I don't know what it was, but I'm like, Adoree Jackson scores like 10 touchdowns a game. Why is his mom crying that they beat like Northern California, nobody knows who you are state? So I just went with that curiosity, and she was kind enough to, I didn't know her name. So he had called her Mama, and I said, Mama, come in here. And I didn't know what I was going to get. And then she reveals, that she's crying because she had breast cancer the year before, and she had no idea if she was going to live to see her son play another snap of football. And so again, I just got lucky there that because of the reps and experiences I'd had before, and just because of the curiosity that we all have to have in this industry, magic happened. And I just felt so fortunate to get to be a part of that moment, because it got a lot of positive reaction, because so many of us have been impacted by cancer or losing a parent or so many things. So thanks for bringing those up, Kevin. Those were really cool moments.
Yeah. So, okay, before we let you go, I do want to, there's this one, tie that we have together. So a few weeks after that, we played USC. And I remember after the game, actually one of my childhood friends, I've known him since 5th grade, he went to USC, played there. So, we usually always try to find each other after the game. But I remember watching that interview segment that you did with Adoree and his mom. And so for the first time, I think I saw someone, I did not know anything about Adoree, like know him at all, anything except for he was a good player.
Yeah.
But I made it like a mission to find him on the field of the game and say, hey, look, praying for your mom. I'm happy everything's okay. And that's because I saw your segment with him. So, I guess that's also one of the cool things about, you never know who or how you touch people in this industry, and how you can help people reach out to others. So just wanted to share that little anecdote with you too.
That's crazy, because that's another thing, Kevin, right? Like, we never know who's watching stuff, especially players. We think you're so locked in, but thank you for sharing that with me, Jordan. That means a lot.
Absolutely. And again, like I said, we appreciate you so much. This has been such an awesome interview. Hopefully, like Kevin, looks like you got something.
Yeah, I just want one question. This probably won't take that long, but I was reading. I was getting prepared. For today's podcast, I read that when you were a traffic reporter, this is completely non sequitur, that you had different names for different stations. So you were like Katie Cooper,
Yeah.
Sam Everett, and like I know this guy Ryan Leong, who like really kind of helped me early on, and I know that he goes by Ryan O'Leary in some stations. So I know like it's not just you. So like, why do traffic reporters use different names?
Yes, I know. Ryan and I worked together back in the day. That's hilarious. So we use different names because some station wanted us to be their exclusive, right? So they only wanted Kate Scott to be on one station. So you had to pick another name. That was one of the things. And also some stations just wanted you to fit their vibe more. So my Katie Cooper was when I was doing country traffic up in the North Bay, and they were like, yeah, Kate Scott is a little too like professional and straight laced for us. Like, can you think of something like a little cuter and more fun? And I was like, what about like, I was really into Mini Coopers at the time, and my sister called me Katie growing up. So I was like, well, what about Katie Cooper? And they were like, perfect, that sounds great. We can put it with Katie. And then Sam Everett was my news name because they didn't want me to use Kate Scott because that was on a competing station. So they were like, we need you to come up with another similar to Kate Scott. We like the professionalism of that name, but can you come up with another one? And I was like, well, I always love like the androgynous names for women. So I was like, well, we'll go with Sam. And so, yeah, it was really fun though. My favorite ones though were the people who went like full in on traffic and were like Diamond Lane. Like
someone called themselves Diamond Lane.
My friend, one of the women who was a fantastic traffic reporter back in the day, Carla Knight, who was on Alice for all those years, but she was Diamond Lane on another station. And then there was a dude, Jordan, this is how old I am. There's a dude who was able to get away with his name being Skid Marks. That was his traffic reporter name. And I'm like, are you freaking serious? Of course. Yes, I know. Old white dude, shocker. But that was a fun start to my career. Anyway, I've taken up enough of your guys' time. This was awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem. Thanks so much again for coming on. All right, everyone. Welcome back to From the A to the Bay podcast. Again, Kate Scott was just on. Kevin, you've known Kate a little bit longer than I have. But I mean, that was just an awesome interview. You can see, I think one of the cool things too, you see the different types of personalities and energy that our different guests have on. And Kate definitely has her own. And I mean, it's just great, again, to have pioneers, right? Have pioneers on and talking about, just how they've gotten to where they are.
Yeah. So Kate and I go back to like a broadcast, not a training class, but it was a orientation class with Pac-12 networks, like August 2015, I want to say. Yeah, because I had a couple of games under my belt on the networks, a couple of water polo broadcasts, and that's like when they introduced Kate Scott. I remember it's like Kate Scott, Elise Woodward, who's done a lot of great things with Pac-12 networks now, doing women's basketball. I know she does like Washington radio sideline as well for their football. There was like a lot of like really like good people in this class. Troy Clarity was part of it, and like Kate was one of those people, and that's where I first got to meet Kate. Like, I had known of her name, but I didn't know her until then, and it's been great to just run into her over the course of the years doing Stanford women's basketball, because she's on a lot of women's basketball calls, or I'd be doing PA for volleyball, she'd be broadcasting games, or we just run into each other a lot now. And yeah, great person, fantastic play-by-play broadcaster, fantastic radio host. I mean, anything she does, she's fantastic. But as a play-by-play broadcaster, like, I really appreciate how she attacks a broadcast, and how, like, as I was telling her, I can tell when a broadcaster's faking it, like pretending they know the sport, and when they know the sport. And when Kate does a game, she knows the sport, and you cannot say that about every broadcaster.
No, absolutely. I think, you and I, we text all the time about games, and not only just the game itself, but the production of a broadcast, with the announcers of it. Like you said, it's easy to tell I mean, it's like one of us will text something about the game, the other, yeah, well, all right, that was cool, but this dude or this announcer said X, Y, Z, and that, and so, no, I mean that's a great point, and especially again when you talk about all the sports that she's done, to be able to, like you said, to say that about all the ones that she's done, it's remarkable, it's incredible, and also a testament to her work and work ethic over the years. And one thing I think is really cool, because again, last time we had our episode, we interviewed Ashley, and it's just awesome. Especially when it comes to women in sports, a lot of the barriers and whatnot that Pac-12 and Pac-12 networks have been able to create. Ashley brought up Roz, and of course, we'd be remiss if we did not shout out Miss Forbes 30 under 30, Sinead Omake. So first off, Sinead, that is so awesome. Congratulations to you. Again, got started a lot with Kari and Pac-12 networks too. So, I mean, you see, there's a lot of women talent that's coming through that station.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think the one thing that Pac-12 networks has done like a lot better than most is hiring female play-by-play broadcasters, because like that broadcast orientation class that I was a part of was mostly female, and most of those women were there for play-by-play. Not all of them, but a lot of them were. And like you think about Pac-12 networks, the female play-by-play broadcasters, Kate Scott, there's Cindy Brunson, Elise Woodward does play-by-play. Oh, her name's on the tip of my tongue, and I know her well. She lives in Utah. We're gonna have to edit this part out because I know her like very. Oh, Krista Blanc. I'm sorry, Krista Blanc. Anne Marie Anderson. Like, I think Pac-12 networks like list of women play-by-play broadcasters like is a lot more than most places, and they're all really good at what they do. So I think that's the one thing that Pac-12 networks is ahead of the curve on. Sorry, Krista, that it took me 30 seconds to think of your name.
But no, I mean, to wrap up the point, and again, it kind of even goes back to Sarah Fuller and her debut. It looks like she's going to kick again this week for Vanderbilt. And I guess it depends on the COVID situation for the rest of the special teamers. But it doesn't matter what your background is, gender, list goes on and on. If you belong in sports, you belong in sports. And I feel like one of my D-line coach Reynolds, he said it best one day. He's just like, look, because we were talking about some other things related to football, and he's like, look, at the end of the day, if you can play, you can play. And it's just like when I think about that for so many other things, obviously, like I said, Sarah did. Sarah kicked this weekend. We're talking to Kate and how she's doing what a lot of people perceive as like the male-driven industries in sports. If you can do it, you can do it. I don't care what look like or whatnot. So no, just awesome to see. And like she said, I hope you can see even more of it as the years go on.
While we're on the Vanderbilt subject, sorry to see my guy Derek Mason go.
Yeah,
fantastic dude. Obviously, I understand why he got fired. I mean, he didn't win, but great dude. It was always great to me when I was doing the sideline reporter stuff for Cardinal Channel. Always gave great interviews. Awesome guy, and I wish him best of success.
And the thing is too, Coach Mason. So he was the first recruiter for me at Stanford. Like he was. I remember the day he came to my high school. He was telling me, yeah, like tomorrow I'm bringing our new head coach. And that's how, that all got started rocking. But I remember the thing with Coach Mason is, and like you say, you've done interviews with him, this, he is such an energetic guy.
Oh man. Yeah.
And this is not going to be his last head coaching stop. I fully believe it. But at the same time, I guess I wonder if you're Vanderbilt, what are you expecting? Because like I get it, James Franklin had.
You're expecting James Franklin.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing. But that's why what he did is so amazing. It's not like if you go to, let's say, UGA, where Mark Richt, he could go 9-4 and people want him to be fired.
Yeah,
like, 9-4 at Vanderbilt, you might get a raise. Where it's just like I just don't understand what And like you said, I get it. He didn't win as much as they want, but for once and every once in a while, they beat Tennessee, which obviously is a big deal at Vanderbilt when it comes to football. But outside of that, again, it's just I don't know what the expectations were, and even for whoever's going to take the job after him, what are their expectations going to be?
Yeah, I mean, if they're still drinking the James Franklin Kool-Aid, then everyone's gonna not live up to the expectation.
Exactly.
And I think that's probably what hurt Mason the most, is that he came after James Franklin.
Yeah, I think that's probably it. And also when everyone looks at how great our defenses were out here when Coach Mason was the D coordinator, and I think that's one of the tough things about being a coordinator going to a head coach position, right? Whenever you're a really good coordinator at one side of the ball, that is like the least, I guess, the smallest expectation that everyone expects you to have when you're the head coach. If you're an offensive coordinator, you better at least have a good offense. If you're a defense coordinator, well, then you better at least have a good defense. It's not that simple.
No, yeah.
It's not that simple.
There's a thing called players that fill out your roster, and you need to have good players.
So once upon a time, someone told me that helped. Yeah. But moving on, so we saw there was a game last night, so weird to say still, where both teams usually have a lot of good players. They still did, but a lot of them were gone because of COVID. And obviously I'm talking about the Wednesday night special, Steelers and Ravens. First and foremost, I got to give a shout of respect for the Ravens for how they fought in that game.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody, I mean, even Stephon Tuitt, who is a D lineman for the Steelers, I believe he's out on the COVID reserve list. So he was on Instagram before, he was saying, hey, good luck tonight to the Steelers. Like, it's not going to be close. Pad the stats up. And I think, but that's what, if you were to ask most people about this game with who the Ravens were missing, I'm willing to bet that's what a lot of people expected. Yeah. Not a one possession game. So shouts out to the Ravens for how they played, and also the coaches for doing what they could.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens didn't have a positive test on Wednesday, and that broke a streak of 10 straight days where at least one Raven tested positive, either a staffer or player. Like, that's
incredible.
Ridiculous. Like, I mean, I hats off, I guess, to playing the game. And hats off to the Ravens for being that close. And honestly, they got screwed at the end of the first half. Like, a Pittsburgh Steeler was sitting on a ball carrier who got tackled for like 15 seconds with the clock running, and they had to run one final play, 3rd and goal, and they should have had 2 plays at least. And they lost by 5. They didn't score on that play, and if they score a touchdown there, maybe it's a different game. Obviously, you can't just add 7 and say the Ravens win. But, I mean, yeah, they did fight well. I mean, they had to use a couple of quarterbacks in McSorley, and, of course, starting with RG3, a one-time Stanford recruit. I heard the story that Harbaugh wanted to have both Luck and RG3 and have a 2-quarterback system. That would have been incredible.
Thank goodness that didn't happen.
I mean, yeah, Stanford's probably better for it, as great as RG3 is, but that would.
Everyone's thinking, right? It's like, what do you mean you wouldn't want to have both of them? Well, first off, if anyone's never heard me talk about football before, I strongly dislike 2 quarterback systems. Strongly. So
if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one.
I agree. I fully agree. Now, obviously, this would be a little bit different because both of those quarterbacks are really, really good. But still, it's just, I mean, there's so many things you got to go back and forth with, and then obviously getting rep. You got to find a way to split reps in practice, and the list goes on and on. It's just a lot. But the one thing that I was worried about, and it did partially come true during the game, was, as you mentioned, it was a 10-day streak where the Ravens didn't have any positive test results. I think I worded that right. And so which means these guys did not practice for over a week.
Yeah.
And the thing with football is you can be in as best of shape as possible, which is why this is always why I will be an advocate for the preseason. Unless you get to hit, your body is not going to be ready for a full contact game of football. It's just not going to happen. And I mean, you saw guys going down left and right. Obviously, RG3 had a hamstring thing, had pop up a few times. I saw Marcus Peters go down. I didn't get to watch the full game, but I saw some other. Even the Steelers had their own injuries. But it was just one of those things where it's like going into the game, I didn't even care how the game looked. I didn't care if it was, blowout, close, whatever. I was just like, please don't let any other injuries come from the fact of these guys did not get to practice as much as they should.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's stuff that people like me don't think about because we haven't played the game. That like you need to be able to have those reps of taking hits and giving out hits to get ready for a football game. And if you can't practice for an entire week and a half before a game or whatever, I mean that game was postponed 6 days.
Right.
It's going to be a huge problem.
Yeah, it's huge. And again, so I hope with the injuries that did happen, I hope they're nothing severe and that, those players, they can play as soon as they possibly can. Especially, I mean, you look at it for the Ravens because now they are right there on the fringe of not making the playoffs. You're expecting, Lamar's going to be back. Both running backs are going to be back. So many guys will come back for them. But if you have these guys coming back, but then these guys are going to get hurt, it's still not really ideal because they're already missing so much, like for the year.
I mean, this was a team that was like the number 1, number 2 overall seed last year in the AFC. Now they've lost 3 straight after a 6-2 start, and playoffs are very much up in the air for the Ravens right now.
Yeah, I mean, we see so many up and coming teams in the AFC where you have Buffalo who's leading their division, and there's the Dolphins right behind them. The Titans are probably going to be right there in the mix to go. It's just so tough where right now you're in that situation that you really can't afford to lose, not even just games, but you can't afford to lose guys.
Yeah, 2 games behind the Cleveland Browns in the division. Never thought I would say that. The Baltimore Ravens 2 games behind the Browns with 5 games left in the regular season. It's just
the 8-3 Browns.
Incredible.
It really is. And then again, the thing about they're doing a lot of this now without Odell too. That was supposed to be one of the big reasons of why they were going to be so good. It's they have Jarvis and there was Njoku and Chubb, and now they brought in. Obviously they had Odell, and then there was the guy he was in Kansas City. His name's I'm drawing a blank now. Is the running?
Kareem Hunt.
Yes, Kareem Hunt. Like it's like all these weapons, and then of course they have some playmakers on defense. It's like they're going to get it. This is going to be the year where they get it done, and then. But I mean, like I said, here they are. So shout out to them. I know a lot of Cleveland fans are appreciating this because they haven't had. I can't remember. I couldn't tell you the last time the Browns had a winning season. So
it was. I remember this because it was the 2002 season. They beat the Falcons in Week 17 to get into the playoffs. I remember.
2002.
Because it was the Falcons went 9-6-1. You remember that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers? The Hail Mary,
right at the end,
the 1 yard line.
That's right. I remember that.
Plaxico Burress, I think, or Harrison Smith, as he called himself when he checked himself into the hospital after shooting himself. That was the last time they had Kelly Holcomb. I loved watching him as a quarterback. Like the Browns were fun. Dennis Northcutt, the punt returner and wide receiver, that guy was great. And they haven't won since.
That's another weird thing. They've had, when you think about it from a receiver standpoint, return standpoint, the Browns have had some guys. Like you said, there's Northcutt. Yeah. Then they remember there was Josh Cribbs before, he had all of his concussion problems. Josh Gordon, I think we all know his story. And now you go, again, to Jarvis, OBJ, and all these guys. So, again, I'm always happy to see the teams and franchises that have struggled to have a chance at success. So good for Cleveland, good for the Browns. And, we'll see what they do going forward. So to wrap things up, NBA news. Whenever you think things are nice and calm, a Woj bomb happens out of nowhere. Man. Rockets and the Wizards make a trade. John Wall coming to Houston, and I believe a protected 2023 pick. And going to Washington is Russell Westbrook. Katie, your thoughts initially?
I mean, it's a huge trade. I don't know how either team gets significantly better.
I agree.
It's like you're kind of, I mean, not to say they're the same player, but you are kind of trading like for like here a little bit, and ball dominant guys who are athletic, or at least we still hope John Wall is athletic as he used to be. I mean, we haven't seen him play in 2 years basically. And so now, how does Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal fit? There was some report that James Harden said he preferred John Wall over Russell Westbrook, and it's like, all right. I mean, wasn't Russell Westbrook your boy? Like, didn't you clamor to have him in Houston? Like, you were so desperate to get rid of Chris Paul. It's it's interesting. Hey, nothing is forever in the NBA. I think that's what we've learned over the last few years.
The thing for me though is for a lot of people, and I think it's a pretty fair split on it right now.
Yeah.
Going again back to, like you said, the whole Chris Paul situation when he was in Houston, and there was the sort of cryptic post-game conference. James Harden, we know what the problem is, and we said we got to get it out. Well, you did, bringing your best friend, and like you said, that didn't work out. So now you're bringing in John Wall, and I feel like it's a narrative that a lot of people have for Russell Westbrook. Wherever he goes, or no matter what you put around him, he can't win. Does this now mean that if this doesn't work out in Houston, and again, I don't expect it to, that you put the same thing on James Harden? I mean, I feel like if this is how we're going to handle one guy, you got to handle the other one the same way.
Fair enough. I mean, I just don't see how the Houston Rockets get past the second round. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they lost in the first round. It's just there's too much, too many tough teams in the Western Conference for them to be considered legit top two. I mean, that's a fair question to ask of James Harden. He hasn't. People could say, well, they were a Chris Paul injury away from beating the Warriors, but they were a Chris Paul injury away, not a James Harden injury away from beating Golden State. Also, I don't think they would have won. I still think Golden State was going to get Game 6 at home, and then Game 7, I still like the Warriors' pedigree over the Rockets' non-pedigree. But yeah, he's a hell of a player. A lot of people hate watching James Harden. I love watching watching him and watching his stat lines balloon stuff. Like, I'm a big fan. I've been a big fan since Anthony Goods told me before his freshman year in college, before Harden's freshman year in college, that this guy was going to take over the Pac-12. And well, Anthony Goods was. So, but not everyone can win. Not everyone can be an MVP and a finals MVP. And so James Harden is a fantastic player. He's a Hall of Famer, but he's not among the elite of the elite. He's not LeBron James and now Anthony Davis and guys like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. As far as winning goes, he's not at that level.
And so that's the thing. And I feel like I've always been like, I love ball movement. There's a reason why, even though growing up as a Hawks fan, I could appreciate what the Warriors were doing, because even as great as these players are, that ball is just moving all over the place. It's fun to watch. Even, a few years back when the Hawks won 60 games, since they didn't have that one superstar, balls flying everywhere, all over the place. I mean, they got Kyle Korver to be an all-star. And I'm not saying that despite him, because everyone knows I love Kyle Korver.
That's your boy.
But, yeah, that's my guy. But at the same time, you wouldn't look at, names on an NBA player list and then pick Kyle Korver more times than not to be the all-star. Yeah. And so when I look at Houston, and I feel like Charles Barkley, when he says it, it's hilarious. Dribble, 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 dribble. It's so funny. And then because the thing for me too, not even just like you dribble, let's say you don't have the ball. I still see a lot of movement, people moving now when it's in the playoffs. I get that's different. Things slow down a little bit. But, if James Harden passes the ball, he doesn't do anything else after that. It's like, again, for me as someone that I like to see the ball movement, like when the Spurs were at their peak and things like that, it's hard for me to watch. I just, like, again, I appreciate how good he is and I respect how good he is, but in terms of the play style, I just can't get behind it.
Yeah, I mean, you are not in the minority there. There are a lot of people that feel the same way, and I don't like watching people stand around I love watching guys put up big stats for one reason
Sure.
or another, and that's what James Harden does. And I love watching people get pissed off when he draws fouls, and all the players like, "Come on, man, this is like," and then like Harden just saying, "Well, hey, if you don't like it, stop fouling me." So yeah, I've always kind of been a fan of his attitude and how he's just so smooth, cool, calm, collected. Now maybe the the off the court stuff with cycling through superstars. Now maybe he isn't the best of running mates, but he is a hell of an individual offensive player, and I love that.
Yeah, and I guess my last note with that too is because I'm glad you said this in terms of a running mate, because I think people automatically assume that if people don't want you on the team or whatever, you're a bad teammate. I don't think anybody would ever say that Russell Westbrook was a bad teammate.
No,
Now he might not be the best player you want to play with in terms of getting to that peak and winning it, but you see everyone besides Kevin Durant. And even then, I think that situation's a whole lot better than what it was years before. But I don't think I've seen anyone really say anything negatively about Russell Westbrook as a teammate. And I wouldn't be surprised to see or hear people do the same about James Harden.
Yeah, I know someone who works on the Thunder staff and like swears by Russell Westbrook. Loves him as a dude, like big time fan of Russell Westbrook. So I think people in Oklahoma City love Russell Westbrook.
Absolutely.
It's hard to win NBA championships if that's the style of play that you have. If Russell Westbrook is your best player, it's tough to win an NBA title.
Yeah. So, of course, and the best thing about it, we get to see all how this pans out in about 3 weeks.
Yes.
Opening day in about 3 weeks. I can't wait.
Same here, man.
All right. So that will do it here. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Another big shout out to Kate Scott for hopping on. That was awesome. And, of course, as always, stay tuned for next week or whenever we get a chance to record again, because who knows who our guest may be that time. Might be a member of the San Francisco 49ers who are actually in Glendale, slightly in Phoenix. Who knows? Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great weekend. And as always, stay safe.